Myself and the two friends, we all had Israel flags, and I went to take mine out, and this, I'll be polite, this man in front of me decided to try and tear it out of my hands, and of course I wasn't going to let him do that. It was, you don't tolerate that sort of behaviour, and wrestled it back from him, and then that developed into a scuffle. We were shouting at each other, then other people get involved. I had, I think, 3 or 4 fellas around me on my neck, my arms, my upper body.
Hello, I'm Phelim McAleer and welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop.
And I'm Anne McElhenney. Welcome to the Ann and Phelim Scoop. Phelim, what's happening in the podcast this week?
Who let the fox out? See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
Actor, activist, our friend, our colleague, star of My Son Hunter, Lawrence Fox, got married at the weekend, and we were at the wedding, a celebration of love and dissent in a very warm climate.
Yes. We'll talk about that. And once again, by the way, unbelievable. Ireland proves itself to be the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. We have an exclusive interview with our old friend Jamie Omahani, the student who was assaulted by a professor for daring to ask a question telling the truth about Israel.
Yes. And the media, they love victims, don't they, Anne? We journalists, we love victims. But what happens when the victim goes off script and starts exposing foreign criminals in our midst? How does the media treat them then? Not very well. We report on a shocking defamation case. Don't be the wrong victim, basically. And this story, the next story, it's by the way, it takes a lot to make me shocked about Hollywood, but it has actually, this story shocked me. Hollywood actually tries to defend a movie featuring a gay 12-year-old, and the movie is designed for children. So there you go.
And mushrooms are in the news a lot lately. And in fact, mushrooms as a murder weapon. We're going to discuss that, and reminded us of another mushroom story that we really, really enjoyed in the past. So we're going to talk about that later on.
I can believe mushrooms as a murder weapon, by the way, but come on to my anti-mushroom.
I know that. Yes.
And a journalist gets a very embarrassing lesson on why we shouldn't let AI do our homework. And we're actually in Ireland at the moment, and Northern Ireland has it's got a great scheme where if you're severely disabled, you can get a car for free on the government maintenance, tax, the whole shebang, insurance. But
so our question
yes,
to you is, and everyone fingers on the buzzers and think about this until we get to that feature, what percentage of new cars in Northern Ireland are given for free by the government?
Yes, you'll be very shocked. So, Anne, Lawrence Fox got married to Miss Elizabeth Logan.
Yes.
At the weekend, we were there.
So outside of London, south of London, a place we hadn't been to before, East Mersey,
North of London.
No, pardon?
Yes, I think Essex is north of London.
I think it's south of London. Anyway, it was outside London. Okay, so controversial. Outside London. One of the things that we really liked, by the way, I was just thinking about this after this film, was when we were driving around the countryside in Essex, the names of towns were just hysterical. Like Tipton and I can't even, but I'm going to find a few of those and put them
Tolls Hunt Darcy. Remember that? TOLLESHUNT, new word, Darcy. And they had the apostrophe on Darcy. I mean, those are the kind of words. And yes, Mersey, Essex, which is a kind of an estuary in Essex, looked like a working town. It's an island, actually, a tidal island by the looks of it. And it's a working town, a lot of fishing, a lot of seafood places.
Really cute. Yeah, really, really cute. And very shocking, as Phelim says, very shocking lack of diversity, which was kind of interesting.
Yes.
But the weather was beautiful. The wedding was gorgeous. It was outside. We're going to show some photographs there from the wedding ceremony itself, which was outside. You'll notice that the celebrant was Father Calvin Robinson. I know many people are fans of Calvin's, because Calvin and Lawrence actually have a podcast called Fox and Father. And beautiful ceremony, really gorgeous, and reminding everyone what marriage is really all about. Sitting at our table, by the way, was Eric Metaxas. There's Eric Metaxas with me.
Our good friend.
Our dear friend, Eric Metaxas. We had a lot of fun with him. We danced the night away. Really, really great. And we wish that the happy couple, years and years and years and years of happiness. So,
and I think actually a lot of people said at the wedding, it's time for Lawrence to get back acting.
Yes.
And we need to get him back acting.
Yes.
And we want to go over now to really, it's kind of a breaking news story, actually. Ireland is a terrible, terrible place to be a Jew. It's a cold place to be a Jew. It's a cold place to be Israeli. It is one of the most anti-Semitic. It is the most anti-Semitic countries in Europe. We're going to talk now to Jamie Omahani. You may remember him. We interviewed him not so long ago about his attempts to set up a society at his university. He's just been assaulted for daring to speak the truth. So let's go over now to that interview we did with Jamie just before we came on air. So Jamie Omahani is a student at Dublin City University who we have interviewed in the past over his attempts to set up a pro-Israel organization on the campus. He had quite the experience of Irish intolerance then. And this weekend, he had an even more visceral reaction to someone who challenges the consensus. So here to tell us all about it is Jamie Omahani. Welcome to the show, Jamie.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be back.
Really good to have you, Jamie. Thank you.
Making the news again in some form.
Oh my God, unbelievable.
Yes.
So this story happened. It didn't happen in Dublin. This happened in Limerick. Tell us where you were and what were you attending?
So Limerick, for people who don't know, Limerick is in the west of Ireland, on the other side of Ireland from Dublin. So yes, tell us how this. Tell us what happened and what you were attending.
So Limerick is my home city. I grew up here, born here, I went to school, etc. And essentially, a couple of weeks ago, I noticed the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They're a very big but extremely radical movement within Ireland. They operate across the country, unfortunately, in big numbers. And I noticed that they were having a guest lecture from Ilan Pappé, who is a very prominent anti-Zionist. He's actually Israeli, but he's a very anti-Israel academic and writer. And he was coming over. He lectures in Exeter University these days, having abandoned his home nation because he doesn't believe it should exist ultimately. And he was over in Ireland, and I saw this, and to be honest, I was very surprised. And I thought, you know what? I have followed this guy for a while. I even bought and read one of his books last year to understand the way these people think. And I couldn't, in good conscience, allow him to visit my home city and not have a go at challenging him in some form. So I gathered a few people together, and he was speaking in sort of a new venue, not very well known, not far outside the city centre in Limerick. And essentially we wanted to go along. We had a distinct strategy of behaving in a far more civil form than the other side do when there's an event that they don't agree with. They go along, they scream, they attack people, they get up on the stage, they stop it happening. If they can, they'll try and stop it ever taking place in the first place. Me and two other colleagues that I went along to the event with, we had the idea, look, we're going to be discreet, quiet, and we'll sit through the speech. And then when it comes to the Q&A, the allotted time for an exchange of what's meant to be an exchange of views, we'll put our questions to him then. So that was the idea.
Yes.
And I had a few things in mind.
Okay.
And we brought our Israel flags as well.
Yes. So the lecture happened. Tell us, do you remember even now what the lecture was about? I know what happened was pretty rough afterwards, so maybe your memory's a bit vague, but do you remember the gist of the lecture from Mr. Pappé, who's he's written a new, unfortunately. So he's written a new book. It was a tough listen, I have to say, but he's written a new book and he was there to kind of promote that. His vision, shall we say, or his theory is that in the coming years, mounting international pressure will bring about the end of Israel, and that it would be a better thing for the Levant and the world in general. He spoke about encouraging the Palestinian resistance. We all know what that means. He's very pro-violence explicitly. He viewed the fantastic strikes by Israel and America on Iran as a big distraction ploy from the war in Gaza, completely ignoring Iran's aims towards Israel and the Western world at large. And then spoke in just really kind of despicable terms about how, as he saw it, the 8 million Jews living within Israel today would have to
live life as a minority within the Arab world and would have to change the way they live, and Israel just simply couldn't exist in its current form at all.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? You then decided to ask a question during, as you said yourself, like during the civilized Q&A section, decided you to ask a question. What happened then?
So yeah, he does his 45-minute speech, I think it was, and it comes to the Q&A session, and this was our time that we wanted to get our opinions in and basically pose a question to him. We know we weren't going to win over any hearts and minds in the room because everyone there is so radical as it is. But it's important that these people at least sometimes face some challenge and opposition to the absolute monopoly that they have on the discourse within Ireland. So my points that I wanted to put together, I essentially said, number one, why have you used the privileges and freedoms that Israel affords you? So free speech, freedom to criticize, question the state you live in. He uses these exact freedoms in order to bring about the demonization, delegitimization, and ultimate the destruction of the only state in the Middle East where you would get away with that. And I said you would have died in a dungeon elsewhere in Saudi or in Syria. So I immediately got the crowd a bit ruffled with that. And they started saying, it's a question, not a statement. It's a question, not a statement. And I said, yeah, okay. Now, having read his book, I know he's also a rabid communist. He ran for Hadash to get into the Knesset in Israel. Hadash is like essentially the Israeli Communist Party. And having read his book, he loved to speak about Israel as some sort of capitalist dystopia and how it was a truly hellish place the more economically liberal it became. And then I said, look, I know you ran for Hadash and I know you hate Israel. Another one of the reasons you hate Israel is because it's a capitalist success story. And then in a room of people who worship Lenin, that of course, and Trotsky and these such figures, that of course isn't going to think Paul Murphy is a hero. That of course, then they were more angered at that. And at that stage there was booing and shouts, of course, already. So I said, look, I better get to my point. So I said, look, okay. Thankfully, however, despite all of your work, Israel will remain prosperous and free long after we are gone. And there, the room's shouting at this stage. And I said, okay, look, I'll go for it. So myself and the two friends, we all had Israel flags, and I went to take mine out. And this, I'll be polite, this man in front of me decided to try and tear it out of my hands. And of course, I wasn't going to let him do that. It was, you don't tolerate that sort of behavior, and wrestled it back from him. And then that developed into a scuffle. We're shouting at each other. Then other people get involved. I had, I think, 3 or 4 fellas around me on my neck, my arms, my upper body, trying to drag me out of the room. And yeah, then it spilled out onto the street. The video cut away, unfortunately, for a minute, but.
Yeah, let's just play. What we're going to do right now is let's play that video. Let's watch this, exactly what you just described there. Let people see it, because there is video of this. Let's just watch that right now.
Why have you, over the years, used the benefits of like free speech, freedom to criticize, etc., in order to demonize and delegitimize and ultimately bring about the destruction, the only country in the Middle East where you could get away with that? And any other country in the Middle East, you would have presumably died in a dungeon by now, like we see in Syria or Saudi or elsewhere. Now, I know that you, as someone who has...
just want to say, it's a question, not a speech.
As someone who has represented Hadash on the communist side, you also hate Israel because it's a capitalist success story. And it's very prosperous, and it's a fantastic place for the quality of life. I'm coming to the question. Okay.
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah. But thankfully, Israel will exist, prosperous and free, long after we are gone. And I want to ask, who all you like? I'm afraid of time. Don't you do it to me, sir. Don't you touch me, kid. Don't you touch me, man. Don't you touch me, sir. I know you. I do know you, sir. I'm Jamie. I'm not touching you. Hands out.
I'm not. Go on, my flag. I free speech spear. I'm not doing anything. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Out. Don't touch me. What are you touching me for? I didn't do anything. Out. What are you doing? Where's my friend? What are you doing? You're fake because he's on promise. Sorry? Okay. It's over for you. Can he come out? It's over for you. I'm not doing anything. He certainly can come out. Isaac, grab your bag. Isaac, grab your bag. Take that down.
Okay, I mean, we can see that from the video that this is, to me, certainly it looks very clear that this was an assault. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you said then the scuffle went outside, it kind of moved outside. What happened then?
Well, no, someone has their arm around your neck there. Is that right? In the room. Do you know who that is? And is that, I'm looking at the video here. Someone seems to have their arm around your neck. Is that correct? Or am I, and who is that?
I mean, I don't know who it was. I only have one name of that kind of group of men at the end of the event. But no, I'm not sure who it was. They're all keen IPSC lovers, probably based in Limerick. But look, there was it was chaos at that stage, and fellas pulling out of me from every part of my body, I felt. And anyway, thankfully, a friend of mine managed to pick up my bag, which was on the floor next to me. And it spilled out onto the street because that was their aim, to remove me. Mm. Then we were on the floor for a minute, but unfortunately the video cut away at that stage. When it picks up again, you can see me and the perpetrator, the guy that started it by trying to rip the flag. We're kind of squaring up outside now. Actually, no punches were thrown, but it's just kind of very argy stuff. And then people came in to break it up again. And we're still shouting at each other. I actually distinctly shouted at him a number of times. I thought you were better than that, because we'll come to that. I'm sure that we know the guy. And at that stage, then once he went back inside, and we assessed that we were all outside, safe. We had our belongings. At that stage, we just got in the car and went home.
So it's been reported by JNS, Jewish News Syndicate, I think they call themselves. They're identifying the man involved as Dr. Ger Downs, who's a senior faculty member of Ireland's University of Limerick. Is that your understanding of who assaulted you as this guy that we see in the video?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is the thing. He's not a stranger. Now, funny enough, he didn't recognize me prior to the incident. But so essentially, he used to be a family friend of ours, would you believe? He would have been at our house for dinner parties in the past. I remember playing with his son when I was about 9 or 10 years old, because we were of a similar age. Wow. And he was teaching the class at which my parents met about 25 years ago. Which is just extraordinary when you think about it. And so I noticed him arriving before the event. He had a copy of one of Pape's books in his hand, and I actually commented on it to him. So I brought my copy of Pape's book along to the event as well, as a sort of cover, posing as, a fan of his. And so, yeah, exactly. So I actually exchanged a few words with him. I said, "Oh, look, you brought your book along. I'm hoping to get mine signed as well." And he didn't recognize me. And so we go inside, and then that's why, suddenly part of my shock at the start of the scuffle is, oh my God, it's Ger starting this. And that's why I actually shout after a couple of seconds. You can hear me shouting in the video, "I know you." And I say, I think, "Don't touch me, Ger. I know you." And his face is a bit baffled. You can actually hear him say, "You do? Who are you?" And I can't remember what I said then, and then the audio gets quite kind of, there's all people shouting and stuff. But
Just sorry, one little kind of just one kind of thing that just occurs to me. By the way, I mean, I have never been in a scuffle in my life, and I would imagine it's quite traumatic. I mean, have you ever been like in a scuffle like this ever in your life before?
Yes, but not for political purposes, I guess.
Right. I mean, it's kind of it's very shocking.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I was able to react well enough to stand up for myself. And a very important thing that I'm very happy with is we never lost the flag. The flag made it home with us. Because flags are, of course, symbolic, important items, and it would have been a shame had he actually succeeded in pulling it off me. So look, yeah, I mean, he obviously felt he wanted to get physical, and sure, like, this is a really worrying thing that we see more and more with this movement in Europe and America, the West at large, you might say. These people really do feel emboldened to use violence after almost immediately, and you can see he felt perfectly emboldened.
Yes. And he is someone that is involved with teaching students. The expression, someone who really should know better about how to behave.
Exactly. According to sources that we're reading, he's the University of Limerick website identifies him as the postgraduate research development manager. Right? He's a senior faculty member at Ireland's University of Limerick. So this is someone who comes in regularly in contact with students. By the way, if he's the postgraduate development, if you want to go and do a master's on Israel's place in the world, if you don't take a certain opinion, you have to ask now, what will his reaction be? Will he fail me? Will he not allow me to do a master's? Will he be violent? My question is now, has anyone been in touch? Have the police been in touch? Have the University of Limerick been in touch? Has he been in touch? What's happening?
So I mean, firstly, as I say, it's extraordinary that he felt so emboldened in that moment, in broad daylight, in a public intellectual event, to immediately set upon someone who expressed a disagreement with him. And by the way, there's about 70 plus in that room. He's alone, and yet he literally behaves like one of Mosley's thugs or the brown shirts, like we saw in the 20s and 30s. And what's extraordinary actually is, if you look at the video, the sheer fury and rage in his eyes. He's got his teeth bared. It's amazing to witness. So essentially, we left the event, and 2 hours afterwards, we went to the local police station in town, and I made a statement to the guards there. I won't get too into the details, but I decided not to press a formal assault charge, because that would lead to an investigative proceedings and a court case. And frankly, that's the hassle and time and just the stress of going to court over this, I considered not to be worth it. It'd be a different story maybe if I ended up in the hospital, but thankfully I didn't. And all things considered, I decided it wasn't worth doing. But I did make a sort of a secondary statement, which simply informed the police of everything that happened, time, place, people, what developed, showed them the footage. And so essentially they have this on record going forward for anything that relates to me or relates to the IPSC, Jardowns, it's on record now. And so, that's and they were very helpful, I have to say, and cooperative, the police at Henry Street Garda Station. And then regards to the university, unfortunately, nothing. No contact from them, and I don't know what their level of communication is with Jardowns at the moment.
Can you just tell us, by the way, for our audience, because they might know, what's IPSC?
The Ireland Palestine Solidarity Campaign. So they are the big movement within Ireland on this issue. Yeah.
Right. And have any politicians in Ireland been in touch with you to give you support, to ask how you're doing, and inquire about what happened?
No, unfortunately. And I mean, through my work with the University Debate Society last year, I'd have multiple contact numbers of politicians from a couple of parties and groups, including some that are based in Limerick and nearby. And no, and I mean, the video has gone pretty viral. I do expect some of them certainly heard about it, but no, it would be.
Did any Irish media outlet get in touch with you?
The only one is the local paper here, the Limerick Leader. And
Wow.
I've dealt with them in the past there, and the correspondent I deal with there, he's a reasonable, respectful and polite man, and they've been good. But no,
it's very funny. So Alan Dershowitz,
the broader national media, such as News Talk, for example, no, not at all.
Yeah. It's very funny. I think Alan Dershowitz, the New York academic, and lawyer, I think he was on News Talk last week. Was it News Talk? And he mentioned, I think they were talking about P. Diddy or whatever, and he mentioned Ireland was the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. And the presenter went, launched on him. How dare you suggest this?
Yeah.
There's absolutely no evidence. Of course, there's no evidence of it if you don't report it. If you don't report, that you got death threats for trying to open a pro-Israel society at your university, if you don't report that the mere presentation of a Star of David in Limerick gets someone so angry, so furious, you can see their teeth baring. And you used a phrase there. It was like, I can't remember the phrase was, but it was like, it's illogical. It's so emotional. It's visceral. And this is what, this anti-Semitism, anti-Jew hatred, anti-Israeli. It's not just about a war in Gaza. It's so deep that it's about so much more. And people need to know there was a pogrom in Limerick. Ireland's only pogrom. And Ireland, by the way, is the place where Eamon de Valera, the Irish president or prime minister, went to the German embassy to sympathize with the German people on the sudden death of Herr Hitler, the German Führer. So
we have history. We have history here.
We have form.
Yeah.
Would you believe? Actually,
by the way, I think it's
just
go on, please.
Sorry, yeah, the Limerick pogrom of 1904, which was led by a Catholic priest. There's actually a new book out about it recently. That happened merely a stone's throw away from this event. Literally, only a couple of minutes walk from where that event happened. And it's extremely important, and people at large in society in the West really need to start waking up to it. As you said, Phelim, this is not about Gaza for these people.
No.
The pro-Palestinian cause, more and more, and Douglas Murray, who's an absolute idol of mine, has been trying to bang this drum for the last few years. It is a vanguard for people who have extremely anti-Western ideals and hold absolute disdain for any of the ideas that have made Western society and Western civilization great for the last few hundred years. Freedom of speech, freedom of association, religious freedoms, the tolerance of differing political opinions, not resorting to political violence. Yeah. All these things, these people are simply, they see them as conveniences to be discarded with. That's why we have people on the streets of London a couple of weeks ago marching through with posters of the Ayatollah Khomeini. And it's becoming a more and more pervasive matter. That's why even a couple of weeks ago in Paris, after a sporting event, you have people rioting and burning cars, waving the Palestinian flag. That's got nothing to do with Gaza, and so it really is a disturbing trend. And yeah, we just need people to wake up to it more and more, that these people are going to be and are currently a source of great harm for our societies.
I saw the Israeli cabinet minister for diaspora affairs and combating anti-Semitism made a statement and basically said about what happened to you, and said it's not every day that you see how anti-Semitism turns even a respected professor into a violent thug who loses self-control at the sight of a proudly brandished Star of David. I mean, it's hard to read that. It's hard to believe that he had to say that. He continued and he said, I'd like to hope that this institution, which platformed one of the world's greatest anti-Semites, that's how he describes the speaker, would at least draw a red line when it comes to violence by faculty. So it'll be, I mean, let's hope we do hear from the Limerick, are we going to hear from the University of Limerick?
what would you like to hear? Would you like to hear from the University of Limerick? What would you like them to say? And what would you like to hear from Mr. Downs and the Irish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign? First of all, the University of Limerick. What would you like to hear from them, and what would you like?
Well, look, I mean, I guess an acknowledgement that sort of behaviour doesn't have a place in a free society. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to comment on Downs specifically and his career, shall we say, but at least some sort of really concrete message given both to him and put out to the public at large that, look, there's absolutely no place for this. And as I was shouting at the time in the heat of the moment, I expected better than that. This is someone who, on paper, is not out attacking people in broad daylight because they disagree with him. You know, he's an academic at a university and a respected member of his community. So yeah, that's kind of the position at the moment.
I think you're being very generous. I think you are being very generous because, in a sense, what happens if a Jewish student is under his auspices and is wearing a Star of David or a kippah, or wants to speak at a rally, or wants to set up a Jewish society? Is he going to attack them? You know, and that, is he going to mark them down? Is he going to discipline them? Is he going to victimize them? And these are all questions that are legitimate questions. So I think you're being generous, and I think for the rights and benefits of the people who come after you, we need a lot more questions answered. We need a lot more action from the University of Limerick and from Professor Ger Downs.
Yes.
But this and it's an unfortunate trend that, you know, universities at best tolerate and at worst encourage this sort of behaviour from their faculty. I mean, I experienced it myself up in Dublin. Last October, even, you know, I alerted them to the fact that the BDS group on campus had brought the proud cousin of Ismail Haniyeh, the former Hamas leader, onto campus, speaking to students. And all my university president had to say was that he had the freedom to express his views, but he takes no action when our debate, where there might be pro-Israel views, was pushed off campus in March 2024, or when he literally, and I mean, I'm not afraid to say this, hid in his office when we tried to confront him about the way I and my group of friends with SSI DCU were treated back in March. And then as for the IPSC,
students supporting Israel, SSI, students supporting Israel.
The group I founded on campus last March. And then as for the IPSC, I mean, look, they're absolute fringe radicals who are supporting Ger. I think he's a great guy in what he did. They even tried to claim that I tried to stab him with my pen, is what they tried to say, based on the video. They called me an extremist agitator who rocked up to cause violence. I mean, sorry, what kind of guy who comes to cause violence sits for 40 minutes through a speech before asking a question and merely defends himself when he's attacked?
Your skirt was too short, you know, is really the problem there. You know, that's blaming the victim, which we're not supposed to do.
As I said to a journalist this morning, and, you know, I even encountered a couple of people who asked me the question of, oh, well, look, you provoked them. You knew what you were doing. And I just think that's such a horrendous approach to take. It's absolutely encouraging the perpetrator. It's helping them. It's an absolute abandonment of the ideas that I mentioned earlier. That, oh, look, actually, you know what? Those Jewish villages that were ran through in Poland and Ukraine in 1941 and earlier, they had it coming to them. They shouldn't have been so outspoken about what they believed in. Or even someone like Salman Rushdie. That, like, it's the same thing. Salman Rushdie. Yeah. It was foolish of him to speak against the Quran like that. He deserved to be attacked, or even Gert Wilders in the Netherlands. he shouldn't express those loud opinions. By having that sort of a view, it's to give up on striving for a freer society.
And we're just going to wrap up the interview now because we're coming to the end. But honestly, this has been so fabulous to talk to you. And I wanted to say something that I hope you're aware of. You know, I saw the story online and I told Film about it over the weekend. But almost within a very short period of time, a dear friend of mine, a Jewish friend of mine in Los Angeles, Beverly, I'll say her name, Beverly, and I think she would have no problem with me saying her whole name, Beverly Woznicki, wrote to me and said, have you seen this? And I think you have no idea how much it means to people, like Jewish friends of ours in the United States and all over the world, by the way, who see you standing up and defending them in this, particularly in Ireland, where things are so crazy. So thank you for what you're doing, Jamie, and don't stop, even in the face of bullies, like the bullies that you, and worse, and thugs that you have had to deal with.
Yeah, the be kind bullies.
The be kind bullies.
Yeah. Okay. No, it means an awful lot to have heard from people. I'll finish on this, but it just means an awful lot to have heard from people across Ireland and the UK the last couple of days, and total strangers messaging me on Instagram, thanking me for speaking up for what I believe in. But I think it's just so important, and people need to do more of it in society. And if I encouraged even one person to now speak up for their views in the supermarket, in any sort of, in their local GAA club, to actually speak up for what they believe in, then that's a net positive. And people need to stop fearing the pervasive narrative. And I mean, I'll wrap it up, but I mean, I read a lot about authoritarian regimes. I was in Poland last week on a Holocaust study trip, examining how societies turn awful when enough people don't say stop or don't say no. And as Solzhenitsyn even acknowledged, I know I still live in the freest part of the world, but authoritarian regimes, it's not just the big figurehead that keeps things together. It's all the citizens that go along with the lie, that go along with the pervasive narrative. Even as I read in Lord of the Flies when I was only 14, you know, mob mentality is something that has to be challenged.
Yeah. Well done, you, Jamie. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye. And I think what's amazing here is just how inspiring actually Jamie is. And as I said in that interview, you know, I think people, this story is going everywhere, by the way. It's viral. I mean, we're noticing, as I said, I got a lovely text from my friend in Los Angeles. It's, you know, it's inspiring because I think, as you said, like, you know, it's not, these are people, he's a person who supports Israel. He's not Jewish. He's just a young, good guy who has read up on actually the truth about what's going on there. So very, very impressive. But and I think we're not finished with this story. It'll be interesting to see what happens and if the University of Limerick get in touch with Jamie or do anything to make up for what happened.
It'll be very interesting. So let's talk about this. This is an incredible story. This really says it all. So this story is about Aisling Murphy and a defamation case. The BBC, the Irish Times. It's about toxic masculinity. It's got it all. So the story is back in 2022, a 23-year-old teacher in Ireland, Aisling Murphy, she was jogging by the banks of the Grand Canal near Tullamore, County Offaly. You know,
in the light of day, by the way, not at night. In the light of day, you know, not at any kind of late hour or whatever. And she was stabbed to death by a Slovakian immigrant, Joseph Pushka.
Yeah,
that's the background.
But can I say, so she was stabbed to death. Then the Irish media and the feminist Irish media and the liberal Irish media said, this is about toxic masculinity, Irish toxic masculinity. And the Irish mothers, and by the way, this is around the time, remember they were trying to ban the word mother from the Irish constitution by referendum. So this was all part of that. Oh, Irish men are just the worst. Then an immigrant was charged, Joseph Puska. Suddenly, it wasn't about that at all. Suddenly, it was just a criminal case. So at her trial, or at her sentencing, actually, when he was convicted, her boyfriend Ryan Casey gave a powerful victim impact statement. Now, in Ireland, you're allowed to give victim impact statements. It's not it's not in every jurisdiction you can do it. And in the statement,
he described Pushka as someone who had lived off the Irish state for 10 years without contributing to society, and stated that Ireland had in fact lost. So this is what he said. The boyfriend said he felt that Ireland had lost its innocence due to the crime.
Yes, and then he said other things like these people have been sponging. I think he used the word sponging. He said that the Ireland they grew up with has gone. That you no longer feel safe during the day, and that Ireland needs to start protecting Irish citizens. In other words, a nationalist, right-wing idea of the world that we talked earlier about diversity, and when I was talking about diversity in Essex, lack of diversity, I was going from the point of view that diversity is not our strength, that diversity is our weakness. And so he was going from a similar point of view.
And actually, at the time when people heard it, it was a very powerful statement. But then a very unusual thing happened, right, Phil? It was almost like all the media all decided, it came to almost a consensus that they wouldn't report on it. So suddenly this statement, only certain, it was only because of social media, I think, that the rest of us found out about it. But basically, they weren't reporting on it.
BBC TV news show interviewed Irish Times journalist Kitty Holland, who's kind of the Maureen Dowd of Ireland, this grand dame of Irish journalism. And they asked her, why aren't you reporting this statement? And she called the remarks unhelpful. And it's like unhelpful. That's whether it's helpful or not. It's news.
Yeah, it doesn't matter exactly. It's news. But she even went further, in fact, and she described what the boyfriend had said. She basically said it was incitement to hatred. That's like she went as far as to say that, and in fact, she was basically justifying the fact that they censored this, that they wouldn't have this extraordinary statement.
Yes.
And as you said, Phil, it's not up to them to decide what's good for us to listen to or not. This was a very extraordinary story. This guy had made this amazing statement, and people need to hear it. But she decided that she wouldn't do that.
And also announced
for him, though. Go on.
But the important thing, as you say, is announced it's an incitement to hatred. So Casey, the boyfriend, he took a defamation case against the BBC and Kitty Holland, and what's happened just now is he has won the case. It was not an incitement to hatred. It was a fact. It was a protected opinion. It was free speech. And by the way,
he was awarded a very large sum, and we don't know what the sum is. But I think the really interesting sort of subsequent development is that in everyone that's reported on this, and the media have reported on this, the BBC have had to pay out and all of that, no one mentions, none of the reports, not in the BBC and not in the Irish media, are not mentioning who the journalist is. They're not mentioning Kitty Holland. Yes. So I was thinking about it, Phil, and I was thinking, isn't it nice to be in the protected class? It must be very nice to be on the sunny side of the street, where we are not, by the way. We're obviously here in the rain somewhere, because obviously Kitty Holland gets the protection from the Irish Times, gets the protection from the BBC, and they don't even mention her.
No. And they don't mention what the words were. Now they can say, "Oh, we don't want to repeat the libel," which is good. But you should mention this is Kitty Holland, who's a famous journalist, not a no-name journalist.
Yes.
In fact, if there are no-name journalists, they're more likely to be mentioned. So I just want to talk briefly about this next story. It's the ELIO movie. So the ELIO movie is a Pixar Disney movie that bombed at the box office, right? And I thought it was just another movie that bombed. And that's the way of the world. Now, Pixar and Disney, they've tarnished their brand with gay Toy Story and all that, Snow White and Rachel Ziegler and all that. But I just thought, I didn't pay much attention to why ELIO bombed. And then I saw the Hollywood Reporter article. Inside ELIO's catastrophic path, America Ferrera's exit, that's the actor, a director change, and erasure of queer themes, right?
In a children's movie,
in a children's animation. So yes, there were queer themes that were in a movie. Actually, it's an 11-year-old boy, right? And then I like the subheadline. Creatives at Pixar who saw the original director's previous cut of ELIO tell the Hollywood Reporter after the movie's challenging production process, i.e. they removed all the gay and queer themes, ELIO just became about totally nothing. And that's very interesting. So basically, they made a movie so gay-centered with so much propaganda that when they were forced to remove the queer themes, there was no movie left, no story left.
Unbelievable.
So
they just won't learn film. They just won't learn, and it's extraordinary. I mean, these companies are investing millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in these films that are bombing.
Oh, God bless you for your innocence, Anne. Apparently, it's at least 150, but some people say it was 200 million for this to make this movie.
And do you have the numbers, Phil? Sorry, how much did it make on the first weekend?
Just over 20.
Ouch! And what a lot of people maybe don't know. So how this works is the opening weekend is a big weekend, and then what happens is it sort of tapers off after that. You know, it doesn't go big after that. That's the big opening, because they do the marketing, and the marketing all works in up to that opening night. So the first weekend is huge, and then the word gets out as well, and of course it becomes kind of it becomes infectious, because people are like, well, that's obviously no good, because obviously 20 million sounds like an awful lot of money. But
I'm just going to look.
Not if your movie is $300 million.
I'm just going to look how much it's made so far. Oh, so far it has grossed 55 million.
Oh, ouch. And so let me just mention this as well, because it's really important. So the marketing budget would basically be the actual production budget. It'd be that again, because they spend huge money on marketing. And then think about this: when you go to the box office is divided in two, with the cinema keeping half the money, and the other half of the money, or less even, can be going back to the production company. So complete disaster. 50 million.
Disney's walking away. Disaster. Disney's walking away with 27 million, maybe, and they've spent between 300 and 400 million.
Oh, unbelievable!
So I love the Hollywood Reporter, and the Hollywood Reporter just reports this as like without any kind of shock or awe. According to multiple insiders who spoke to the Hollywood Reporter, ELIO was initially portrayed as a queer-coded character, reflecting original director Adrian Molina's identity as an openly gay filmmaker. It gets even worse. They were going to show the 11-year-old boy who was the hero of the movie as having a male crush in his bedroom. Yeah, like what? So this is a quote from the Hollywood Reporter. But either way, the characterization gradually faded away throughout the production process as ELIO became more masculine following feedback from Pixar leadership. Gone were the only direct examples of his passion for environmentalism and fashion, which is obviously means I'm.
Oh yeah, typical 11-year-old, by the way.
Yes, fashion, yes, a boy.
Yes, and environmentalism film.
But also a scene in ELIO's bedroom with pictures suggesting a male crush. Yep, that's right. They thought it was okay to sexualize an 11-year-old boy. And
in a children's movie. That's the really crucial moment of that, right?
Yeah. So this is another quote from the Hollywood Reporter. The writing was first on the wall for the troubled production when the film from Molina conducted an early test screening in Arizona. You can imagine, in Arizona. Although viewers expressed how much they enjoyed the movie, they were also asked how many of them would see it in a theater. How many of them? What percentage raised their hand? And do you think?
Oh no, I can't do this. Go on.
When they were also asked how many of them would see it in a theater, and not a single hand was raised.
Oh, ouch. Okay.
That's when they went in and removed the gay, queer themes.
Unbelievable.
So I think Pixar and Disney are learning their lesson. They've had a number of bombs.
Maybe. I don't know. It seems I don't know. Maybe they, no, it's not good. Anyway, across the world, on the other side of the world in Australia, there's an amazing story. We just wanted to briefly touch on this because we just thought it was fascinating. Because we kind of really do like murder mysteries and murder stories and serial killers. As you know, we've done obviously a podcast on serial killer. But a recent story that broke where a woman has now been convicted of poisoning to death her in-laws, and an in-law's sister, feeding them toxic mushrooms. And this is an extraordinary case that's come to light here, and really awful, actually, by the way. And she made the famous, what is it, Gordon Ramsay. She made the famous Gordon Ramsay beef Wellington,
That's
which
correct.
of course is the beef, and around the beef. I've never made it, by the way, so I'm not going to start talking about it. But basically, I mean, I know it's a very, it's a very precise thing to do. But around the beef and underneath the pastry is this kind of paste made of mushed up mushrooms. And she basically, sourced the mushrooms. She was someone who knew about mushrooms, sourced these mushrooms. Her name is Erin Patterson, and she has just been found guilty of murdering 3 of her relatives, plus an attempted murder of a 4th. And she actually, and one of the people who survived and was able to talk about this thing said that they saw that she put the food like on all the plates were the same except for her plate. Her plate was a different color because, of course, she needed to not take it. So really, really awful. And her estranged husband had been invited. He didn't come in the end because he kind of felt a bit weird about the invite. And on top of all of that, to make it even worse, she lured them to come to dinner by telling them that she had cancer and wanted to talk about it. Really, really unbelievable. So I think she's going to be away for a long time, Phelim, right?
Yes. By the way, mushrooms are the devil's spawn. Anyway,
yes, Phelim has definitely got issues with mushrooms. I do understand that. We won't get into the details. But it also made us remember a story that we thought was fascinating, was Nicholas Evans, who wrote The Horse Whisperer, which was kind of this huge novel. And actually, it's kind of interesting. I was reading about it earlier today. And he sold the book to Robert Redford, for Robert Redford to make a movie out of it. And Robert Redford starred in the movie. And at the time, he was basically in debt, and the whole thing, was disastrous. And Robert Redford actually paid $3 million for the book. But he was living in England. He had friends and relatives in Scotland, and he went foraging. This is a few years ago. Went foraging, made a meal with mushrooms, with a very similar. Now, no one died, but life-altering injuries, basically. I think it was many of the men here, what do we see? I'm just looking at the details here. Basically, when his family fell ill, Nick had realized his mistake. He immediately called the botanical gardens in Edinburgh for help. And those who ate the mushrooms, so the people who ate the mushrooms suffered kidney damage varying in severity, and some of them had to have kidney transplants, basically. They were on dialysis for years and then had to have transplants. There were children involved in this at this family meal, and and here's a kind of a nice shout out for McDonald's. On the way back from the foraging or whatever, the children wanted to go to McDonald's, and so they went to McDonald's. So the children actually ate very, very little, like a tiny amount. And doctors who were spoken to at the time said that if the children had had the meal, they would have died. So I think and I feel like it's incumbent on me to say to everyone out there, if you need mushrooms, you buy mushrooms in the supermarket. That's where mushrooms come from. Mushrooms don't come from the forest. Mushrooms come from the supermarket, because making a mistake in the forest could cost you your life or cost you life-altering injuries. Anyway,
making a mistake in the supermarket can just mean you buy too expensive mushrooms or the wrong kind of mushrooms. It's a kind of different caliber. Talking of making mistakes.
I love this. I love this so much, Phelim. I love this story so much. The Chicago Sun-Times.
The Chicago Sun-Times. So the Philadelphia Inquirer. They published a reading list for the summer. 20 best beach reads.
And people love that, by the way. People love those lists.
Yeah. And, let me just read you. There was one from The Last Algorithm by Andy Weir, Tidewater Dreams by Isabel Allende. These are massive. So Andy Weir, he's the guy who wrote The Martian. And Weir delivers another science-driven thriller. This time the story follows a programmer who discovers that an AI system has developed consciousness and has secretly been influencing global events for years. And my favorite one was Tidewater Dreams by Isabel Allende, the beloved
huge
Chilean...
Huge name.
Oh, yeah. The beloved Chilean-American author returns with a multi-generational saga set in a coastal town where magical realism meets environmental activism. Allende's first climate fiction novel explores how one family confronts rising sea levels whilst uncovering long-buried secrets. And the twist in the plot...
The twist that you never saw coming is those books were never written. These were never, ever written. So the guy who was commissioned to do this, to create this list, in this sort of, in an insert into the Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer, he decided, instead of doing his homework, he decided to ask AI to do this. And AI, as we have mentioned before, and it actually is really curious and weird, by the way. AI lies. It's unbelievable. Like, I would have thought that a machine would just do what machines do, but AI lies. So AI spat out 10 of the 15 books that were in the list. 10 of them are fakes. But when you read them, like Phelan was reading there, and actually the list is hilarious. When you read the description that AI created, it's almost like AI is making fun and writing the kind of thing these people would write. And you said it. You said it really well earlier when we were talking about this film. You said the reason that this even happened is because basically the way that people are writing nowadays, shoving in environmentalism, shoving in trans stuff into these books. It may as well be AI.
But generated. But you're not allowed. But you're not allowed to write about anything outside your own culture.
Yeah,
you're not allowed. So the books are written by AI. They're written by progressive strictures. Progressive assisted on intelligence. Actually,
yes, yeah,
not
so
intelligence.
Anyway, it's another moment for us to kind of say, basically, of course, the newspapers all had to apologize and all of that kind of thing, but. This is the downside of AI, and it needs rigorous checking. And if you're asked to do homework, do your homework.
Can I just say, it's because so many soap operas and many novels feel like they already have been written by AI because they've been written by progressive strictures. That's why, I don't mind my novels being written by AI now because I feel like they're not genuine artistic creations at the moment.
Already.
Yeah. So I think this is our final story.
I love this so much, Phil. I love this so much. So the question we asked at the beginning was, we asked people, how many cars do you think in Northern Ireland, are given free to people with disabilities? What percentage of all the cars in Northern Ireland, the new cars in Northern Ireland, are given to people for free with disabilities, right?
And the answer is
Phelan?
Almost half.
42%. And then where the really funny stuff starts is what constitutes disability.
Just context. So Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain in Northern Ireland. So this is a UK-wide disability perk of disability. In the UK, 1 in 5 cars is paid for by the government, 20%. Now that is a unbelievable statistic as well.
Already.
But then suddenly Irish people, Northern Irish people, and we're not in Northern Ireland. When I go up there tomorrow, I must look around because obviously everyone is so disabled. It's shocking. Like they're severely disabled, that half the cars are sold are for severely disabled. But perhaps they're not that severely disabled, because what conditions would they have?
So you can get a car for free in Northern Ireland if you suffer from constipation or tennis elbow. Or, and I love this one, Phelan, or if you have an alcohol or drug problem. You get a free car, because that's really what you need, by the way. If you've got an alcohol or drug problem, the one thing that you definitely need is to get a car. Well, obviously, because you need to be in touch with your drug dealer, you need to be able to get to the pub, right? These are important things. Like, let's not make fun about that, because it's actually a big thing now. But I love the constipation, by the way. Also, there are 10 people in Northern Ireland who have a free car based on the fact that they struggle with, they have a failure, they're failing to thrive, basically, and they got tax funder paid. But the other one that I think that you found, which I thought was extraordinary, was and also people, 190 people who had social phobia got cars, but also people who had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is where you force like your child to think that they have a sickness.
But also people with Munchausen syndrome as well, not just by proxy, who think they are sick. So if you think you are sick, that's a sickness that gets you a free car. And also, I should add, on top of the free car, when you hit that level of sickness, you get, I think it's an extra 500 quid a month on top of your dole. Which, as you say, if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, you get an extra 500 quid plus a free car. Like, it really is.
Well, by the way, it's a real encouragement, by the way. It's like, so you've got a drink and drug problem. I do. Well, here's a car and 500 extra pounds a month, by the way. So it's like, it's definitely a nice reward.
I was in a pub, it's quite a while ago, but a woman was telling me this, and she said to me, the government killed my brother. And I said, what did they shoot him or whatever? No, he was an alcoholic, and they put him on. It was the DLA then, which is the Disability Living Allowance, but as people in the area called it perhaps more accurately, the Daily Liquor Allowance. And he didn't. The last thing he needed was a car and 500 quid on top of his stove, and he drank himself to death. So that talk about a failure to thrive. If you're going to guarantee go ahead.
I love the Daily Mail, of course, who we just adore the Daily Mail, because they just get these granular stories. They get these, colorful stories that are really, really worth hearing. And so they added this story to this particular one about the cars. And they said, they focused on one, and it's Aaron Roper, who was apparently he had explained to the government basically that he was so disabled, he didn't have the strength to grip a knife and fork or move more than a few meters without a wheelchair. The 31-year-old was sufficiently convincing for the Department for Work and Pensions to put him on disability benefit, and he was awarded a brand new car under the Motability Scheme, which offers anyone in receipt of a qualifying mobility, a free car, right? It was only when his mother came under investigation for suspected benefit fraud that a different picture of his physical abilities emerged. DWP staff not only observed him walking a mile unaided through the Devon town of Axminster with a guitar slung across his back, but also lifting heavy weights at a local gym. It was his exploits at the fitness centre's car park that were most telling, however. In a video the gym uploaded to Instagram, Hooper can be seen demonstrating his strength by pulling his car several meters across the tarmac using a rope attached to the tow hitch of the vehicle. Delightful.
Yes.
We're coming to the end of the show, Philip. We should talk about the comments we got from last week.
Yeah, so please put your comments in the YouTube or on the Apple podcast. We got a comment. You talked last week, Anne, about your inability to open these new water bottles in Ireland. Because the EU is making them attach the top, and it makes it harder to open. And Harold Robinson 7775 said, "My mum's in Donegal. She still twists off bottle caps with pliers since the EU tether rule." And then someone else wrote about Detective Jim Wood, who's just retired. Amazing detective. He's the guy who brought down Gosnell Duke Hoy 960. And it said, Jim Wood deserves a statue.
Yeah, that's true. We agree with that.
Anyone else there, and caught your eye?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, by the way, really do enjoy the adventures of my AirPods, who I can tell you now, just with the most updated. But somebody wrote, and I'll say who it was. The AirPod saga is the most Irish side quest ever. Norway to Croatia via Baluba. I'd watched that road trip film just for the customer scene, and then somebody else wrote and said, Croatia, the pods are having a great vacay. What a life. And I can tell you now that the pods are back again in Banja Luka, and I have the address, and I'm wondering, maybe I write to this address and say, do you ever give me back my AirPods, by the way?
That was Elise Angel 9789. She writes, she thank you, Elise. Elisa, I know you drop a lot of comments. Yeah, I am with Elisa, actually. I'd much rather be in Croatia than Banja Luka in Bosnia. It's Croatia got the better deal in that war, I think.
Yes.
It's got a much better scenery. That's the end of the show for this week.
Thank you, guys.
Prayers to everyone in Texas, by the way.
Yes, very much so. And we're going to talk about that. We'll be talking about that next week. I mean, it's an extraordinary scene, but what's really extraordinary is to listen and read and watch people all over social media politicizing it in the worst possible way. And it's Democrats, it's leftists who are politicizing it and saying the most awful things about the deaths of these gorgeous little children, these perfect little people, and the people who took care of them, and some older folk as well who were in the area. Yeah. It's absolutely horrific. The last time we looked, it was over 80 people are gone, and who knows how many are actually going to be gone. So it's really, really horrific. And we will talk about it next week. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in, and please tune in again next week and leave a comment.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.